In this video, I'm going to talk about grief after suicide, but in a gentle, non-graphic way. So there's no details about methods. The focus is on emotional and physical grief, trauma, and care for yourself. However, if at any point that this feels like too much, it's okay to pause, step away, or come back another time. You're in control of how you listen. Now let me start here. This isn't about comparing pain. Grief is grief, and loss hurts no matter how it happens. But if you've lost someone to suicide and you're wondering why this feels heavier, messier, or harder to carry than other types of grief that you've experienced, you're not imagining it. Although suicide loss shares similarities with other grief, the shock, the longing, the missing, the way the world no longer feels right, it also comes with these extra layers that affect the body, the nervous system, the mind, relationships, your identity, and even how safe the world feels. Today, I want to talk about why that is, because so many people are carrying this, and they're carrying it thinking that they're doing grief wrong. They must be, because they're not healing. But you're not doing it wrong. Suicide loss is often described in research as traumatic bereavement. This means that the loss is not only emotionally devastating, but neurologically overwhelming. From a nervous system perspective, suicide loss often registers as both grief and a threat to life. The brain struggles to integrate the loss because it violates assumptions about predictability, safety, and protection. Studies on traumatic grief show that prolonged activation of the stress response system, cortisol, and adrenaline remain elevated, sometimes for years, particularly when the loss was sudden, unexpected, or involved unanswered questions, which we'll talk about later. This is why grief after suicide so often shows up physically. Sleep becomes disrupted. I wake every 2 hours. Digestion changes. Your muscles hold the tension, and pain can appear with no clear medical explanation. When I lost my daughter, Diva, in 2020, my body changed in ways that no one could have prepared me for, and no one would have expected. My stomach physically swelled and took on the shape of pregnancy. I remember I'd look in the mirror and think, how can this be? Why is life so cruel? Why is this happening? Nothing could explain it, but the body remembers, and the body holds the score. My heart didn't just ache emotionally, it hurt physically, and it would feel heavy. My chest would be tight, and sometimes I get sharp pains in my heart too. And something else that I never expect or I'd ever heard of before was the soles of my feet would be painful. It was like my body was carrying an unbearable weight, and I'm standing on pins. And that went on for over a year, maybe two. But these things matters because the physical symptoms of grief are often minimised. To be honest, I minimise them. My heart hurt more. And research confirms that suicide bereavement places a real significant load on the autonomic nervous system. Common physical responses do include chest pain, stomach issues, headaches, rashes, immune changes, dizziness, and exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes. You have appetite changes and feeling like prematurely aged. And that is such a common thing that other grieving mothers that I've met have found. So if this sounds familiar, you're not weak and you're not imagining it. Your body is responding to the trauma. If it helps, Take a moment now to notice where you are and feel the surface supporting you, whether it's the chair, the floor, you're in a stable place, nothing needs to change. For those grieving, the work isn't about pushing through, it's about gently signalling safety to your body again and again and again in small ways, whether that's going for a walk, heat, painting, a hug. For those supporting someone, please understand that your calm presence and patience and your steady support matter far more than any advice you can give. Being there to make meals or handle things, important things that need taken care of. Intrusive thoughts are one of the most distressing aspects of suicide loss. Research shows that after traumatic loss, the brain becomes hypervigilant. It scans for danger. It replays memories in an attempt to regain control, which makes sense. This isn't rumination because you're stuck. It is a survival response. It's helping you survive. Things like, why didn't I see it? What did I miss? What if I'd said something different? What if I had made that phone call? The mind believes that if it can identify the exact cause, it can prevent future loss. But suicide rarely offers clean answers. Mental illness, neurobiology, trauma history, environment, timing, and exhaustion, they all interact in complex ways. There is rarely one moment, one sentence, or one person responsible, although there is growing research around domestic abuse and the impact that has on suicide attempts. So the brain keeps searching because the uncertainty of not knowing feels terrifying. So if your thoughts feel relentless, notice it, bring it to your attention, and gently bring yourself back to the present. You're here now. For those grieving, it can help to name the thought without engaging with it. You would say, this is trauma. This is my brain trying to protect me. Or this is love with nowhere to go. Then ground yourself in something physical, either doing some breath work or doing something with your hands or noticing the room. And for those supporting, arguing those thoughts away often increases distress. So acknowledge the fear that they're experiencing. Fear needs compassion, not correction. You can't talk it away. Guilt is one of the most researched experiences in suicide bereavement. Studies consistently show that higher levels of self-blame among parents, siblings, and close loved ones. This is because suicide violates a core belief that love should protect. When protection fails, the mind turns inward. Love's supposed to heal everything. But guilt and responsibility are not the same thing. Guilt is an emotion that is rooted in attachment. Responsibility implies that you had control. Most of us didn't have control over another person's internal pain, their illness, or their moment of crisis. If you look at it, even trained professionals cannot always reliably predict or prevent every suicide. Holding yourself to a higher standard than systems that are designed to support people is an impossible burden. You haven't had half the training they have. So if guilt is something that you're carrying, notice how your body responds to it as we name it. A question that can gently help loosen that guilt over time is this: am I actually responsible? Or am I wishing I could have saved someone that I loved? That distinction really matters. Suicide loss is associated with a higher likelihood of complicated grief, or otherwise known as prolonged grief. This doesn't mean that the grief is pathological. It means that the loss is layered with trauma, shock, stigma, unanswered questions, and often systemic failures. For many families, they need to wait for an inquest, which could be a year later or more. Investigation and advocacy, they keep the nervous system activated, and the grief doesn't get the quiet time that it needs to integrate. Research shows that suicide bereavement is linked to increased risk of depression, post-traumatic stress symptoms, and suicidal thoughts in those that are bereaved. That doesn't mean that this will happen to you. It means that support is essential, not optional. Support can really help. So if you have thoughts like, I don't want to be here, that's not a failure. It's a sign that your nervous system is overwhelmed and needs some extra care. If this brings up anything difficult, bring your attention back to where you are right now. I'm going to put some helpline numbers in the description and some resources. Please, if you're experiencing any difficulty with suicide ideation or thoughts of not wanting to be here, reach out and get support. Healing is not about fixing the grief. It's about learning how to live alongside something that has changed you irreversibly. And that means working with your nervous system, not forcing it to change back to where it was before. It can help to rest more than you think you should. Just eat simply, like you would for someone that you were caring for. Cancel plans without feeling guilty. Use warmth, drink water, use gentle movement, and try and bring some laughter into your life. Some lightness is allowed. The laughter doesn't erase the love, but it just allows your nervous system a breath of oxygen. One book that helped me feel less alone in this kind of grief is How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed by Megan Devine. It doesn't rush healing or search for meaning where really there may be none. It simply acknowledges that some losses do change us forever, and that learning to carry them is not a failure. We're not just going to live without grief one day. So if ever you want to look for it, it's in my Amazon list. But more than that, it's the message that's important. You are not broken for still hurting. If this video found you in the middle of it all, I'm so sorry that you are here. But I'm really glad that you found your way to this space, because you're not alone. As this video ends, I want you to take a moment just to notice where you are and feel some safety, and just feel the floor underneath your feet. If you can take one thing with you today, please let it be this. Your grief makes sense. Your body's responses make sense. The heaviness doesn't mean that you're failing. This kind of loss comes with an extra weight, extra layers, extra questions, extra silence, and often with stigma. And it also deserves extra care. You're allowed to take this slowly, and you're allowed to need support. You're allowed to stay in bed today. Just please get up tomorrow. And please know you're not alone. Please subscribe and take a look at some of my other videos around grief and trauma. Thank you for sitting with me.